Hi everybody, my name is Andy and I'm an RCIC. It's the middle of September. In this video I want to explain some research that I did regarding spousal appeals. And you'll have to bear with me a bit. This is going to be a fairly long video and I'm trying to make it all into one cut without any video editing. Unfortunately, my computer hardware is a little ancient, so for me to start splicing pieces together, it's extremely time consuming. And not only that, I live downtown Vancouver and it gets really noisy too. So periodically, I may need to pause a video just to let the fire trucks go by, literally. Um, so a little bit about me. I'm an RCIC. I'm also a designated representative. I'm really passionate about my work at the IRB tribunals. So a while ago, back in July, I noticed a couple of cases I was observing, and I've observed probably a couple hundred of them. It definitely keeps my own. It's an attempt to keep my own skills up. But I've noticed that there was a couple of cases regards to spousal appeals when the couple met each other online, and that really piqued my curiosity because I just wondered what are the factors in making a determination whether that case is successful or not. One second, I'm just going to pause. Okay, so here's what I'm going to try to do, and I'm not going to put this in the Google Slides in slideshow mode because I just find it a little awkward because I have to navigate into a Google Sheet, into ChatGPT, and also Google Gemini. So I find moving around that a little awkward, and but that also summarizes what I'm trying to do here. So what I did is I went into Canly, extracted the cases I thought were relevant, and so far I've come up with just over 150 cases where the couple met online and the initial spousal application was rejected and they went to IAD. Then what I did was I took those files, I extracted the information that I needed as best as possible using a combination of ChatGPT and Google Gemini. And then I used, and the last part is probably a little unusual way of doing legal research. I use some stats to try to identify what are the key factors. Now, having said that, as we all know, there's no such thing as an unimportant factor. As an immigration practitioner, you have to be cognizant of being able to answer any questions if there's a problem with that file. But what this exercise through this exercise, what I'm trying to do is using some established statistical methods, how to identify the key factors, and then compare, case law to those factors to see where they differ and where they line up. So again, uh, how I perform the data extraction is this. I went into Canly and had a very similar prompt to this. This is still, unfortunately, this is still not quite right in my opinion. If I use a prompt like this, where I'm looking for these keywords, either met online or dating website, and I filter out for per section 4, I'm only getting 105. Whereas when I went through it manually, and I had to take a couple of passes, I've so far found just over 150 of them. So, if you use Canly, I'm sure you're aware that it's a little quirky sometimes, and you may see something later on that you realize, oh, I should have picked up. And this is also my approach to legal research. Obviously, we look for jurisprudence, but in my opinion, it makes a lot of sense to look for trends, use a more statistical approach, and look for trends throughout many files versus just a handful. One of the best examples I have was another research paper that I did on internal flight alternatives. And in that, what I did was I started breaking down by country what were the internal flight alternatives I identified for that country, and I tried to break it down. I tried to summarize it so that I could prepare not only the submission, but I wanted to prepare my examination of the client and the cross examination by the RPD member, and in case if there is one, minister's counsel. I thought that was important because one, there is no such thing as jurisprudence on internal flight alternatives. The our RPD division, they can tell you what they consider a viable internal flight alternative is during the hearing. It's really difficult to prepare if you didn't prepare. Like your client is, they may feel intimidated. Why am I being asked this question? And an example of that, I sat down with one client. I can't remember. I think she said she's from Ghana. Yeah, it was last year, and I sat down with her to identify what the internal flight alternatives are. And just through that interaction, well, did you try this city? Did you try that city? It just made her feel more comfortable in explaining, well, the city doesn't have the hospital that I needed, or the language is different, even though it's the same country. The language spoken is different in that area. So that was a very useful exercise. And so again, because I was able to extract as many files that I could identify for that country, it really helped the case out. So that's the same approach that I take for all my legal research. And again, as a side note, I love doing legal research. I love watching tribunals. So if there's anybody out there that's looking for assistance in that area, please let me know. Okay, so back to what I'm showing. This is the Canly website. This is the filter that approximates what I'm looking for. Again, I'm looking for couples that went to the IAD to appeal a refused spousal application if they've identified themselves that they met online. So what I do is this, for example, and I'll just see if I can follow this process that I showed on the slide deck. So what I do is this. I go to the file, and then I just double check to make sure I have the right file, meaning that I'm looking for a reference to ERPA 4, and there's some wording that, they met each other online. Oh, my apologies. There's a ambulance going by. Okay, the ambulance passed by there. So they met each other on a dating website. Perfect. This is what I want. So what I do is this. So my process is I download this file and I feed it into the two AI tools that I use. Now to download this, one little trick that I've come up with. If you see a PDF icon, I don't use that. And there's a very particular reason why I don't use that. Instead, I will do this. I will say print, and then I print it, save it as a PDF. The reason why I do that, use that method, as opposed to clicking on this, is this is a pre-formatted report, and it leaves out some bits of information. The most important bit of information it leaves out is this hyperlink. So what I do is I take this into ChatGPT, and let me find you an example of that. So and I don't think this is important, but I've got a plus subscription to ChatGPT, and I have a bunch of saved prompts. I don't know if you can get the same for free. They're always changing their licensing, so I'm not 100%. Okay, so this is one of the files. It could be exactly the same file actually. Mirza? No, it's different. Okay, my apologies. So what I do is I will either upload the file, either I've downloaded to my hard disk or using ChatGPT and Google Gemini, you can save the file to your Google Drive and you can search it that way. And then I enter in the prompt, and I'll discuss this prompt a little more thoroughly later on. Here's my prompt, and what I do is I break it out into a table like this. So this is the prompt, and here's the results from that prompt. And then what I do is I copy and paste it into my Google Sheet. Okay, I copy and paste it in here. So these are all the past runs. I copy it in here, and then what I sit down is there's some data that will return something like, okay, this is a great example. I look for time duration from when the couple met physically in person to when they decided to get married. I ask for that duration of time. This is ChatGPT will return text. What I do is I manually clean it up and I create my separate column like this. So if it says 2 years, I enter in the number 24. And then if it says, oh, they decided to get married within days of meeting each other in person, I'll enter in the number 1, indicating 1 month. So that's the process of cleaning up this data. Okay, then after I've got all that, I created some initial descriptive statistics on some of the fields that I'm looking for. And through that process, that process took a while because as I was doing that, I didn't really know which were the important variables or not from a statistical point of view. But when I discovered something, sometimes I would reiterate back and try to get a different permutation from it. And then lastly, as a part of this study, I created a logistic regression to rank the important variables, and not from an immigration point of view, but just from a statistical analysis point of view. And it also helped me clarify in my own head mathematically what were the important factors. Obviously, I would never tell a client, well, this variable you have increases your chances of success up to 90%. Obviously, I didn't want to go there, but it's for my own understanding of what I need to be ready for in the submission and cross-examination, where I need to emphasize my energy and also look at any shortcomings pertaining to that file. Okay, so I already showed this screen, and me showing you this, let me just backtrack again. Me showing you this screen is a lot more clear than this slide. So basically, you can use some advanced filtering in Canly to try to get the information you're looking for. I still find Canly to be a little finicky, and it did take me a few passes through it. But this is essentially the filter that I'm looking for and how I extracted the files that I needed. Okay. Yeah, so this is a good point in time for me to just take a quick pause. I'll come right back, but I'll leave the screen up because this is Chavez. Chavez is important case law in the area of spousal appeals. Chavez, it's a spousal appeal, not at the JR level, but at the IAD level. But in that write-up, it outlined what are the important factors. I use this to help me build the ChatGPT prompt and the Gemini prompt to break everything out like you saw in this table. So this table is built on the factors identified in Chavez. And I'll come right back. So just wanted to take a little bit of a pause. So you know how I use a filter referring for and with these two keywords. Now, since Chavez drives a lot of the legal reasoning, I could have, instead of doing it this way on the filter, I could have looked up Chavez and then looked for all the files that references that. And that's another way of doing it. But I also want to mention one thing here. The reason why I'm showing you how I do this by downloading the PDF file, running that really long prompt, and let me see if I can find that prompt again. Run that really long prompt. Oh, sorry. Run that prompt, and this prompt is based on the fields identified in Chavez. Why don't I just ask GPT here, show me all the cases of a couple meeting online that applied for an appeal at the Canadian Immigration Appeal Division. As far as I know, there's no tool that will do that properly. What ChatGPT and what these other tools do a very good job of is indexing what's already on the internet. What it can't do is, I think there's an issue with Canly too. Canly has restricted that access. So ChatGPT can't do the following: go into Canly and find me all the files, with my search criteria. I've tried a few different times. I get some mixed results. And as a matter of fact, I've even tried to do something like this. So knowing this URL, for example, let me find this. Where's that URL? Yeah, so I even tried something like this. So copy link address, I go into ChatGPT, summarize this. That. I can't even do that properly. So at one point in time, I thought I could, like middle of last year, I think, but I haven't been able to do something like this recently. And so I do find that because there are hallucinations too, I'm processing one file at a time. When I enter in the prompt to break down Chavez, I find that I can do up to 5 or 6. Anything more than that, I do see some errors. So in other words, inside ChatGPT, like how I had how I would say attach a file, I've tried add from Google Drive. I've attempted to bring in like 10 files at a time, 10 different PDF files at a time. And I would change the prompt to say, create me a data table for looking at each one of the files with this information. And it sometimes works, but I have found some hallucinations when I try it that way. So, and because of my research, I actually forced myself to read through all 150 files. And as a matter of fact, some of the files I've reread a second time because I've had to make multiple passes. And again, this is part of my own learning process of this particular area of immigration law. Okay, so I talked about Chavez, so that's up here. And the next slide, coincidentally, is this prompt. So let me show you this prompt again within ChatGPT. It's a little easier to read. Okay, so let me go back to the slide deck now. Okay, so I talked about Chavez, and I'm going to pause on this prompt. And I think maybe a version of this within ChatGPT itself might be a little easier to read. So here's the prompt. Here's one of the two prompts. So again, I drop in the file and I say this. This file is a Canadian immigration appeal. Summarize the case. Now this is important. This really helped me format everything properly. 1 second, there's some background noise. Okay, so here are the fields that I'm looking for that I thought were relevant. Oops. Sorry, I hope I didn't lose anybody there. It navigated away from where where the information I wanted to show. Okay, here. Okay, so these are the fields that I'm looking for uh, based on, again, Chavez. And I added a few of my own after a few passes, thinking that there could be some important information there. So looking for the age of the appellant, I added this. Is the appellant and the applicant, are they able to communicate initially in the same language together? I think, and I need to go back and revisit this. I think the cultural dissimilarity is an important negative driver for an appeal. Um, Also, the fact that I'm going to jump down here. Um, is there any proof of financial payments from one to another? Obviously, a financial interdependency is important in Chavez. And unfortunately, I added this second field in later on, so I'm gonna have to take another pass. I also asked, is there any proof of shared assets or living expenses? Meaning, did they cohabitate? Did they share bills? Did the Canadian appellant give give any assets to be shared? And I think separating these two out are important because, and I'm generalizing a little bit, financial payments are typically a few hundred to a few thousand periodically, like for example per month. Shared assets is something like, to me, buying a piece of land with or a house with both persons' name on it. The Canadian naming his new spouse, his or her new spouse, the beneficiary of insurance, or naming that person in their will. So that's more indicative of a longer term commitment. And I didn't break this out until like much later on. So I would love to bring this in a future study. Okay, and now I've got three variables of time that I brought in. This is indirectly mentioned in Chavez, but I wanted to break out three blocks of time. The time when they to met each other online to their physically meeting. I wanted to look at that. I didn't find any significance to that, but maybe later on there's something noticeable. Nextly, and this is one of the important variables actually, the duration of time from physically meeting one another to deciding to get married. Surprisingly, I couldn't believe how many files I came across where they decided to get married within the month of physically meeting one another. Could be the case that they had a really very long-term, online relationship, and they felt like they knew each other. But there are a lot of cases where that period of time when they physically met to decide and get married, very short, and it had a strong negative factor to their appeal. And then the last duration of time is the amount of time from the marriage to marriage to the hearing date. How much time in there were they physically together? Unfortunately, the data for this is very weak, and only in some files was it very clearly identified. I think this is a very important factor, but also keep in mind that information is closely aligned with another piece of information called knowledge, the spouse's knowledge of each other. As a matter of fact, that variable drives the whole basically the entire logistic regression model. Having said that, it is having another variable, even though it's closely aligned, could be really important down the road. Just another way of looking at it. And I'm kind of rambling a bit, but it also it also there's one emphasis that's a little different statistically versus legally. Shab has identified all these factors. Statistically, there's a concept called multicollinearity, meaning you can't have every single variable in your analysis, in your regression, because there's so much of an overlap, the coefficients that the model generates, you're basically trying to model background noise. So I'll show you later on. There's a few different methods of identifying what the strongest variables are, eliminating the variables that have a lot of crossover and just focusing on the strongest ones. But if there is a variable that's highly correlated, you may decide to swap one out with the other. But I'll get to that, I guess, in the next hour. But anyways, so to carry on with this prompt, um, okay, this is there's three interrelated fields here. I asked for the fact whether the couple could speak the same language when they met. Also, this is clear, the nationality of the applicant. And I'm also asking for the guess of the ethnic origin of the appellant. In almost none of the files, actually, I can't think of a single file, did it identify what the ethnic origin is of the Canadian that's sponsoring the foreign national. Um, in in a lot of cases, it'll say, "Oh, this Canadian was born here or naturalized as of this particular date." Um, what I wanted to see is if there's any, I guess, negative correlation when there's a clash of cultures. When uh, one person is born in, say, East Asia, marrying somebody from Africa. I wanted to see if there's any kind of correlation there. The data for this is very weak. The guess of an ethnic origin based on the surname, it's it's a it's a bit of a wild guess. I think there's still value there, but I just don't have the data for it. And then obviously nationality of the applicant, which is almost, well, it is always given in every single file. The next thing is, and it's maybe a little out of order, but I ask for the age of the applicant. I ask for the age of the appellant too. I also ask for the age difference. The age difference between the appellant and the applicant. I also then ask for any negative travel history, and then there's a couple of fields here, and you're going to wonder, oh, how are you going to include that, in a new numerical evaluation? Because stats is basically based on numbers, right? Um, a summary of the feelings of the applicant's extended family. I also have a very similar field of a summary of the feelings of the appellant's family. And then I also ask um, the knowledge of each other. I think I asked that down here. Yeah, a summary of each person's knowledge of each other's lives. Okay, I extract that from ChatGPT just to be consistent in what I've done already. But to maybe jump ahead of the gun a little bit, I asked those same questions from Google Gemini. And I will show you later on, I just found Google Gemini, it provided a much more thorough answer and much more consistent answer. That's my approach as of middle of September. These models, their capabilities change all the time. I wouldn't be surprised by next month I may realize, oh wait a minute, ChatGPT can do the whole thing, or I'm better off just using Google Gemini for the whole thing. But at this point in time, I'm using the mixture of the two. Um, and I guess out of this, this is kind of interesting too. A field indicating whether they have actually children together is one of the identified factors. I think it went to JR. I need to look up the actual citation. Surprisingly, the number of children together was not statistically significant. Um, when I look through the file, only in a few cases were there children identified that the couple had together, and a couple even said, "Oh, there's a the female partner went through in vitro fertilization." So it went into that detail, but having a child didn't seem to affect or well, put it this way: the overall acceptance rate, a positive appeal was about I think 36%. Having a child just I think a slightly increased that, but when you only have I think 12 cases, and seven of those cases were successfully appealed out of 150. That's why it wasn't a significant number, but I do think uh, when you look at the overall pattern, all the cases, not just the online files, I think this would be a positive driver. Okay, so running this prompt returns this type of information, and again, that's what I copy into my Google Sheet. You have to excuse me for maybe repeating myself a few times. This is a long video, so I try my best to just summarize where we're at in context of the whole process that I've set up. Okay, so yeah, if you if you can't tell, I do have to pause every so often. There's a bit of background noise, and it's hopefully I don't lose people by bouncing around a little too much. And I do need to show the Google Sheet, which is my data repository, ChatGPT and Google Gemini, and then between that, I'm trying to organize some additional thoughts I'd have too. And again, my screen isn't the best for presentations. So you have to bear with me. Hopefully, you'll get something out of it by the end of the video. Oh, as an aside, I'll put in some chapter breaks too. So, and you can obviously also pause on any sections. Like for example, just to look at this prompt. This is not something you can absorb just by just within a few seconds. So, anyways, and so you can always pause the video too. Okay, so here's the prompt. I put it into ChatGPT, and okay, here's the other factor. So I mentioned I use Google Gemini for the retrieval of some of that information, and at the at the end of this presentation, I'll show you how I put everything into a logistic regression. But a logistic regression, you need numbers. Like stats is basically everything's based on a number, right? Well, how do you evaluate something like this, something like the some of the feelings of the applicant's extended family and children? How do you tie a number to that? How do you tie a number of the couple's knowledge of each other, which is the most important variable? So how do you assign a number? And this is where sentiment analysis comes in. So sentiment analysis is a calculation based on the words used for that particular in our case for that particular case. There's obviously some issues with that because well, I'll talk about it later on, but there's some variance. So by the end of this presentation, I'm not too concerned with the actual overall coefficients, but just the general strength of that, the importance of that area of that, I guess, factor identified in Chavez in relation to everything else. So again, I'm using something called sentiment analysis to calculate a number for me for the three important factors: the feelings of the appellant's family, the feelings of the applicant's family, and their knowledge of each other. And the prompt is as simple as that. Using machine learning sentiment analysis, and I'm telling it to give me a score between -1 and 1. Calculate separate scores representing the following. Um, so I feed this in to Google Gemini, and I'm just gonna jump ahead a bit. I may have a screenshot. Okay, so here's a screenshot of it. I use Google Gemini because if you can see that, it'll give me a score, but I love the details that it gives me, the reasoning behind how it calculated that score. I found in the middle of September, I found that Google Gemini was consistently giving me better results than ChatGPT. So once I started doing that, I couldn't I couldn't say, oh, I'm doing this chunk with Chat GPT. I'm going to use Google Gemini and calculate a score based on that for these subsequent files. What I had to do is I had to wipe out the entire column and start over again. So then I know it's being evaluated on a consistent basis across all 150 files. So I love the fact it was giving me such a rich answer. Okay. Uh, I do like to show the slide deck because it lets me bounce around a little bit. Okay. So again, after I do all the data extraction, after I've downloaded the PDF, feed it into my prompts, it goes into my Google Sheet. Okay, so here it is, and I think I've showed a quick glance of this, but it's time to show you what it looks like. So based on that prompt, I copy it into the sheet and align all the column headings and everything. And what I've done is I have a row for each row represents a unique file. So I always try to keep the link back to Canly where I found it from, just in case if I want to quickly look it up. I always found that to be handy. The name of the case, the date of the decision, the age of the appellant, were they able to communicate, and I added this variable in there. It turns out I thought this would be important, but it there just wasn't enough data to drive me to any conclusions. So basically, column F is identifies were they able to communicate when they first met. And then later on, if they weren't able to communicate, did one of them try to take a lesson in that language as an indicator of the strength of the relationship? Okay, so then by the time of the hearing, were they able to communicate, or if the language they learned, say they learned, I don't know, Japanese or something, did that Japanese national try not only try to learn English, or not only try to learn English, but were they able to converse in it by the time of the hearing? Okay, and also it could be the case where the Canadian try to learn Japanese, or something like that, right? Um, okay, so here's my two financial variables: financial transfers from the appellant to the applicant, where there's indication of share ownership. Here's my three time variables: duration online to physical meeting to the marriage. I had to manually calculate this up. A physical time together after the marriage to the hearing date. Whether I added this later on. There's a few cases where they met online and they said they're in a conjugal relationship. I think there was like 10 or 12 cases and only one was successfully appealed. Okay, here's the one of the fields where you sentiment analysis. So what I started to do was the long text that I just showed you from Google Gemini. I would copy some of that into this field here. The appellant's ethnic guess based on the surname, the applicant's nationality, the applicant's age, travel history to Canada. Oh, okay. Age difference, which this is a surprising find actually. Okay, and then over here, I'm gonna skip a bit. Over here, here's the score. So these numbers here are taken um, are taken from this value here, and again, this is a output from Google Gemini. So yes, so what I do is for every single row, I enter in that value here. I started recording the council name because I did find uh, I think it was quite indicative of the strength of the case. If the couple decided to get married within 1 month of meeting each other, oftentimes they wouldn't have legal counsel. Um, I think that speaks for itself how strong that case is. And I wanted to also track it just for like a cross reference later on too. Okay, so that's the Google sheet that I use as a repository. Okay, so that's the end of the first section. So in the first section, I described the overall reason why I even started this study, the steps that I use. So again, there's no magic bullet in AI where it can automatically extract everything and download into one place. I had to manually go into Canly, find the files I was looking for that indicated that it's a spousal appeal and they met each other online. I download those PDFs, ran those two prompts, one from ChatGPT, uh, ran this prompt from ChatGPT, and oops. Okay, so this is the prompt in ChatGPT, and I just brought up the Google Gemini. So I'll show you the prompt here. Um, I was using a shortcut. I started telling Gemini just rerun the same prompt. Okay, so let me show you just to prove it. Okay, yeah. So here's a prompt. It's identical to the slide. This PDF follows a summary of a Canadian spousal appeal. Use machine learning sentiment analysis with the score, blah blah blah, and extract those three fields for me. So then what I do is I put those two pieces together, do a little bit of data cleanup, and I put everything in here. Um, I'll make this version of this readily available for anybody that's interested in following up. And then actually, if you see any issues, see any errors, or have any ideas as to what additional fields that I can put in, do let me know. Okay, so back to the slide deck. So I'm going to stop here momentarily, and this is the beginning of the next section. After I've downloaded everything, well, what kind of information can I extract from it? And here's a very high level summary of what I found. So that was a good spot to just pause the slide deck for a little bit. So here's some descriptive stats, and it's not really worth going into how I calculate this. They're just a bunch of different spreadsheet calculations, so there's really nothing earth-shattering or magical about it. But this is the kind of the fruits of the labor so far. So again, I've downloaded the 150 odd files into Google Sheets, and this is what I see. This is what the file is telling me. Okay, so out of 151 appeals that went to IAD, and actually I should this wording is confusing. Only 56 out of the 151 was the appeal allowed. In there, in out of the 151, 10 cases the couple were applying under as a conjugal relationship. But only one of those cases was allowed. And this is actually an interesting read because it's a much older gentleman, and I can understand why the initial spousal application was refused. The gentleman was substantially older. I think he's a 22, 23-year age difference. And he also withheld the relationship from his parents because he said he's quite embarrassed by it. So that was also a negative factor. And his partner, he found, was from the Philippines, is also identified as transgendered. Despite those negative factors, the appeal was allowed, and it kind of ties into Chairperson Guideline 9 for sexual minorities. So I thought this was really interesting case that I just wanted to mention, and there's a row for this case in the file too. The other thing I noticed, and I found it really interesting, was in general the Canadian sponsor, the appellant, was roughly 15 years older than the foreign national. The next thing is, and again, this is just more of a note to myself. I initially combined a variable for financial interdependency, and what I should have done is I should have broken it out by identifying payments from the appellant to the applicant, and also whether they're shared assets or not. Because when I broke it out, I started seeing a bit of a positive trend when there is a shared asset, meaning that, and I think I mentioned it already, the shared assets tend to be higher dollar value and also a stronger indication, obviously, that they plan for to be together in the long run. For example, I see like a purchase of like real estate, or like naming the partner in a life insurance policy, or in the will. The last interesting stat, and this is very high level, is that I found 12 cases that the couple had children. This is seen as one of the factors, but I found that out of the 12 cases, 5 had successful appeals. So it's just slightly better than the overall population. And I wanted to talk about this again. When the I guess the population is a 38% success rate, that's taking every single file. You'll see later on, I'll run some stats on individual variables and ask it, is this a variable statistically significant? Meaning, for example, there's some variables that may dramatically decrease the likelihood of a successful appeal. That is statistically significant. Whereas some other variables, and I think it is having children together, it's right on that line. So, but it doesn't mean that it's not important. That's definitely like an important factor, but it doesn't necessarily change if you take out that variable. It doesn't necessarily change this success rate. So that's when it means. Well, that's when stats mean when it says statistically insignificant or significant. Okay, so I thought this is a very worthwhile exercise for me to see some general trends. And this one, 15-year age difference. Going in, I had no idea. There was such a large gap. Okay, so this is one of the examples that I just decided to dig a little deeper. One of the other factors I identified was a negative travel history. So then I ran a regression based on only looking at this variable and this variable indicates whether the applicant had a failed visa application to Canada, a failed refugee claim, or or something fraudulent. There's a couple of cases where there's a history of misrepresentation too. So I I ran this in, ran the travel history, and it said the following. Uh, so it says travel history is not statistically significant. So in other words, what does this say? It's tiny. It says, oh, I was trying to get that arrow out of the way. It says, is that I think the yeah it says the effect is tiny and not statistically meaningful. So I think in how should I phrase this? A negative travel history must be overcome. How you overcome it is by showing that the um, couple have a strong relationship, and the couple have to be very honest about the negative travel history and come up with an explanation for it, a plausible explanation for it. Okay, and so here's another field. And this was really surprising. So I'm going to go back to the Google Sheet. And again, as I mentioned before, I have 3 time periods that I measured. So I measured the duration of time when they first met each other online to the physical meeting, the duration of time from the physical meeting to the marriage when they decide to get married, and then lastly, the physical time together after the marriage. So this variable became significant. Before I started, as I mentioned before, I had no idea so many couples decided to get married almost like immediately upon meeting one another. For example, this case, married when the same week that they met each other. This says within days. This was 8 months. So what I did was I took this text and I manually keyed in like a month number. So if it says days, I entered in the number 1. This one approximately 5 months. I think when I read through it, it was actually closer to 4, so that's why I entered 4. If they're conjugal partners, there was no marriage date. This one about they decided to get married about within 10 days. So this is rather, I don't want to use the word sketchy, but they met each other online within 1 or 2 months and married within 10 days. Roche versus Canada. Oh, I think I remember this one. The decision was allowed. Yeah, that was really interesting. Like they were able to show that they had strong family support, and they had shared a lot of conversations, and so yeah, this one was successful, and the age difference was 17 years old. So yeah, that's one of the rare cases where they met each other really quickly, they got married very quickly, and was still allowed, and the appeal was allowed. Here's another 6 days, another 10 days, 8 months, a little longer. So, and I'll go back to the slide deck and I'll show you. So ChatGPT came up with this histogram. So what I did is I stacked the bars, each bar representing a certain number of months. I told it to just use eight bars. So here's a number of months between the time they met physically to when they decided to get married. Here's a count of how many times that occurred. Red means that the case was dismissed. Green was when the case was actually allowed. You can tell right away, the more rushed the the relationship is, the less likelihood of a successful appeal at the IAD. So I found that to be quite interesting. And one of the unique variables of a couple that met online, one of the unique variables that I extracted out on top of the Chavez factors. Okay, so we're on slide 15 now. Okay, so I'm going a little slower, but I think it's worthwhile to review this. And again, let me just pause it here. Here's a prompt for that histogram. I'll just pause it here for like a quick second for you to just maybe pause it on your own, and then take a screenshot if you need to. So if you ever want to do something like this on your own, you can do something, enter in a prompt similar to this one. And again, I use ChatGPT for this. Google Gemini, the stats are very powerful, but there's certain features that it wanted me to use. I think it was what's the name? Google Opal, yeah, or something like that, where I have to run code manually. So that just introduces another wrinkle to this presentation that I thought would be too distracting. Sorry, yeah, it's not Google Opal, it's Google Colab. Google Opal is a Google experimental agent creation tool, which is actually really powerful. I might make a video on that down the road. But anyway, so here's our prompt. This is a prompt to create this histogram. Okay. The one data field, I just wanted to mention this. So I found the physical time duration of when they met versus when they decided to get married, one of the key variables to look at. The other field I wanted to also extract is the physical time together after the marriage. In some case files, it was very clearly identified and summarized. Most of the others didn't have that information. So I thought it would be useful to have that as a contrast between the variable based on the couple's knowledge of each other, because their two variables are obviously very highly correlated, but it's nice to have that contrast too. Okay, so which leads to the next topic. So so far I'm showing you how to evaluate numbers. Fairly straightforward. But how do you evaluate something like the couple's knowledge of each other, or for example, the appellant's family's feelings toward the relationship, or the applicant's family's feelings toward the relationship? How do you put that into some sort of model, statistical model that combines them all? And the approach that's commonly used is called sentiment analysis. So how I extracted that was with this prompt inside Google Gemini. So what I'm looking for is I'm extracting a number from -1 to 1 to +1, indicating what type of language the ID member had used. So I'll get into this a little more later on in this presentation. So here's one field I tried to create, but I just wasn't comfortable with some of the results because it was a bit of a guess. So what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to see if there's any type of significance to the fact that the ethnic origin of the Canadian PR or citizen, their cultural background is different from the applicant. So I tried to enter in a field created by this prompt. I tried to create a field called the appellant ethnic guess, and basically I told ChatGPT, guess the ethnic origin of the appellant based on the surname. So obviously that's a pretty bit of a reach. The other thing I tried to put in is a variable indicating whether the couple could communicate in the same language or not when they first met. So between those two things, I tried to show if the cultural dissimilarity had any significance to whether the case was successfully appealed or not. And this is something, it's not in the final model that I'll show you later on, but I think there is value to it, and I did see some indication that the ethnic dissimilarity was a factor. But again, until I have cleaner data, I'm not prepared to really quote too strongly one way or the other. Yeah, there's some more calculations I had done using the appellant ethnic guess variable, and it did say has a where the couple is similar, according to ChatGPT, there was a noticeably higher success rate. So this is something that I'll definitely revisit down the road. Uh, and then ChatGPT asked me for a chi-square test, and I think this is the statistical significance. Then it says, okay, it's just right on the margin. It doesn't support a meaningful correlation of this data set for the cultural variable. So I get a little bit of a mixed message um, based on ChatGPT, and I was uncertain of how accurate that ethnic guess was in the first place. The other thing I try to do, and I'm putting up the screen just in case if you're curious. I try to also group based on the geographic origin and cultural similarity, not based on the same country or surname, but whether the guest nationality, the guest cultural origin of the Canadian national was similar to the foreign national. So I tried to got GPT to group it based on the geographic region. So if you're from South Asia, maybe there's a strong indication of a genuine relationship if one person's from, say, Pakistan and the other person's from Bangladesh, or one person's from Bangladesh and the other person's from India, that type of thing. Or if we're from East Asia, if you're from East Asia, there's a cultural more of a cultural similarity from China to Taiwan, obviously, or China to Hong Kong, or China to Korea, a little bit. So that was one of the areas. That's one of the areas I'd like to get back to if I have time to continue on this research. And again, that by regional similarity. Uh, and it says based on my data, it's not statistically significant. So something I'll follow up on later on. Part of it is then also like I mentioned before, can the couple even speak to one another initially? So which ties, this is, I think, slightly more accurate look at if there is a cultural similarity or not. Because, well, frankly, um, if the two people can speak English or a foreign language, that would imply that they're more similar. And here's the prompt, and the results are even this. There's no statistically significant association. Okay, next one. Oh, age variables. I found this to be interesting. So I extracted three different age fields. One of the age of the appellant, the age of the applicant, and the age difference. So surprisingly, this is one of the surprising things. In general, there's the age gap uh, between the couple is about roughly 15 years. So there are some cases where and because of that, there are a lot of cases where the appellant is quite a bit older. So this is something else I want to revisit because the appellant's mean age of a dismissed case is 51, allowed case is 50. And I need to redo this calculation because I think this number changed eventually when I got all 150 files in. And the age difference is of a dismissed case is 15, allowed case is 14.5. So here's a histogram of that. So this is the histogram of the appellant's age. So the median is right here. The green indicates the appellant's age when the appeal was successful. Red indicates when it's the case is dismissed. Note the slightly larger number of appellants over the age of 70, and most of those cases were dismissed. Here's a histogram of the applicant. Notice that so the median is right around there. Notice the median is again about 35, 36 years old, much wider spread. Oh, and in case you're wondering, I'll just pause it for 1 second. Here's the prompt to create this histogram. The histogram for the appellant, if you want to have a look at that and pause it. And here's the prompt for the applicant. Again, so we've covered a lot of the numerical fields. So let me just reiterate again. This is the prompt I used to calculate the sentiment analysis within Google Gemini. You'll notice the sentence here, because the level this variable, the level of knowledge and of involvement for each spouse, is so tightly tied into the verdict. I actually noticed that one of the reports that Gemini returned, it actually said, "Oh, the verdict is positive because these reasons, and the proof of the knowledge and involvement is high is because, well, it drove the verdict." So I found that I realized it was too tightly coupled together. This is my attempt to break out the reasoning of the verdict to the level of knowledge and involvement of the couple, because the verdict is the dependent variable, and I'm trying to make this the independent variable. Okay, and so this is one of the samples. So when I type in that prompt into Google Gemini, I like the fact that the report returned was much more informative and rich in content, so that I was starting to copy and paste this text into my Google Sheet. And most importantly, so you see this number here, that's what I would type in to that particular case. So it's all the way over here. So it's these three columns: the appellant family sentiment score, applicant, and the knowledge of each other. Yeah, again, as I just mentioned, the details that it gave, it proved to me that it actually Google Gemini read through the entire case file and generated a score based on a thorough summary of that. When I first did it with ChatGPT, it was actually sampling individual paragraphs, and it would say, based on this paragraph, I'm assigning this score, which is obviously not what I'm looking for. I'm looking for more of a thorough read of the file. I think, however, though, if I were to revisit ChatGPT to calculate sentiment analysis, I just need to instruct it, make sure to read the entire file before the calculation is returned. I think that would have solved the problem. But it's also good to see a comparison, because I still ask a similar question from ChatGPT compared to Google Gemini. So both side by side. And so what I was doing, this is the sheet that I use for analysis. I pasted that information into this other tab, and I could start analyzing some of those differences. And frankly, it goes to explain why this report took me so long. I started doing this in July, and it's September now. So yeah, it's this getting to this point has certainly taken me a lot of time. Okay, we need to talk about this too. So, even though I mentioned Gemini provides a more thorough answer and it provides a great summary, I found that if I were to feed in the same PDF file of the same case, the numbers could slightly change. So obviously, building a logistic regression, which I'll which I'll be into later on, building a regression of any kind based on uh, a, a variable that's non-deterministic and that can change, that's a big problem. So, you know, I take the results of that model with a big grain of salt. The other thing is this: for there's no set, I guess, how should I say, framework for an IAD member to create their case summary. One might write in a really eloquent, aggressive fashion. Another might write in a in a conservative fashion. Well, because sentiment analysis uses a score based on the word choice, the same file given to two different IED members could be written in two completely different ways, but the fact pattern is exactly the same, right? So that's why I take this with a grain of salt. So even though I can come up with a number, uh, Gemini gives me a number, I'm happy with it. It seems to make sense. Building a model, a statistical model, there are some issues. So I just wanted to mention that. Okay, so here's the next section. So I'm just gonna leave this up for a second and just tell you, well, dig a little bit more about myself. So again, I'm an RCIC, and I love watching tribunals, and that's part of the reason why I do so much legal research. In the past life, I did roughly 12 units, 12 university level credits. I was going for another certification. 12 university level credits on linear regressions and stats. The punchline is I only passed 9 of them. I didn't do so well in the last one because the linear algebra just got like way too complex for me. So, anyways, that's why I feel comfortable in talking about regressions, linear regressions, and in this case, I'm using a logistic regression. So, what a logistic regression is a estimation of success. I'm trying to use our legal framework. So, for example, a successful appeal would be where the value of this variable, actually it ties in perfectly. The value of this variable, decision Boolean, is 1. And 1 means that the case was allowed. A dismissed is 0. So I'm trying to figure out what are the factors that that gives me a probability that's close to 1. Okay, so now this compares, if you compare this to a linear regression, and what a linear regression is an estimation of a value. One of the prime examples of that is in the real estate field. Uh, BC Assessments, it's the central, I guess, part of the taxation office. They estimate the value of residential and commercial property. They use regression analysis to come up with what they think your property value is worth. So they feed into a linear regression the size of your property, past sales, how many rooms you have, those type of factors. Contrast that to a logistic regression where we're looking for the probability of an outcome. Okay, so this slide, I'm jumping ahead a little bit. So one of the issues and one of the differences between looking at doing legal research and stats is this. So we've identified what some of the important variables are, right? And these variables is taken from Chavez. So the what Chavez is looking for, the Chavez factors, I used a prompt to generate these fields. Plus, I added some of my own fields that are unique to when a couple met each other online. The problem is, if you're not familiar with statistics, you may say, you know what, I just want to throw every single variable in there and come up with like a coefficient for each that will tell me, what are my chances given the set of facts. And unfortunately, in the world of stats, there's something called multicollinearity, meaning that there may be a couple of variables that are so closely tied together to get a better result, it's better to remove one of them. In this study, I had mentioned before, I would really love to bring in the duration of time the couple actually spent together after they got married. But I also mentioned that there's going to be a high correlation of that to the couple's knowledge of each other. I still want that other variable, but chances are I can only use one or the other in some sort of regression analysis, not both. So that's the big difference. In statistical analysis, you have to select your variables. In legal research, you need to know and understand all the factors that are driving a successful appeal or not. So what I started doing is I did this. Inside ChatGPT, I entered this as a prompt. So my dependent variable, meaning that what the ultimate answer is this variable called decision Boolean, and all it is the decision. One meaning the appeal was allowed, and zero meaning the case was dismissed. Given that's my dependent variable, here are my possible independent variables. So I literally threw in the fields that I thought would make sense. So age difference, month duration, physically meeting to getting married, the applicant family score, knowledge of each other, number of children, so on and so on. So I threw that all in, and actually I cut this off because the appellant's family sentiment score is also there. So I put this into a linear regression. Sorry, a logistic regression. A logistic regression, pardon me. Okay, this was one of the first reported results from ChatGPT. It actually told me, you have way too many variables. You need to figure out and trim down the number of variables that you're using. And I thought, okay, well, wait a minute. Let's see. Yeah, it offered me a couple of different ways of narrowing it down. Lasso, which I won't get into, or PCA. So I think I use Lasso in this case. So And again, I'm just to restate, you can't simply throw everything in like Chavez. You can't look at every single factor and expect coefficients for every single one. And multicollinearity is a technical term when two variables are closely correlated to one another. I created a correlation heat map to look at which variables are closely aligned. I'm not going to get into this too much because I just want to jump to the regression itself. So I told it to rank the variables. And it came back with this. Knowledge of each other's sentiment score, which again, I'm a little suspect because, again, the same case file, you could get slightly different number, and no two judges, no two ID members write the same way. Basing any kind of correlation on that is a little suspect. The next thing is the applicant sentiment score, the appellant family sentiment score. It also said, the month's duration physical to marriage, the duration of time from when they met each other physically to when they got married is also really important. And then I'm going to skip to the next slide. What it did say, though, is these other variables have no statistical significance, which is kind of interesting. And once I have more data, I'd love to rerun this again. Okay, so I said, okay, run a new logistic regression just with these 4 variables. Because it makes sense, right? So as I'm based on the previous report, I told it, select the strongest ones, create me a regression so I know which are the strongest variables that determine a positive outcome. And then it went off and it generated it. I thought, oh yeah, this is great. So basically, say for example, say somebody met each other physically and they decided within 6 months they decided to get married. So you multiply 6 with coefficient, and I'll show you. I can't show you the calculation directly because there's logarithms involved, natural logarithms. So, but I fed that into ChatGPT to calculate the probability. The knowledge of each other. So say that score, this score over here, it's this column. Say the score is very high, 0.9. So you multiply 0.9 with the coefficient, run it through the calculation. It'll give you like a probability. You'll add that probability to the overall score. The appellant. So same idea, a positive value, meaning that, the appellant family really on board, they really like the spouse. They said, they wrote in letters of support, they even testified. So you add that to a positive score. But then it dawned on me, wait a minute, why was this negative? This doesn't make sense. Shouldn't this have a similar bearing to that? Shouldn't the applicant family score have a similar weighting to the appellant family score? And as it turns out, I asked ChatGPT, and this is the response. It actually says, great question, and it's a case of multicollinearity. Because the two variables are so highly correlated, one variable coefficient will be giving you information. The other coefficient, you're actually modeling noise. It's not giving you a good result. I dug into this a little further, and I realized, okay, the appellant family sentiment score, when the case is allowed, is 0.46. When it's dismissed, it's actually negative of 0.1. So the difference between those two numbers is 0.57. The appellant family score, tends to be higher. But not only that, even if the case is dismissed, it's still slightly positive. And I realized, well, this actually makes sense because, and I'm generalizing a bit, if somebody goes overseas, finds a spouse that they like, you're changing the financial status of the entire family. So odds are, even though may have some reservations, they don't tend to express it. Therefore, even if the case is dismissed, it's still slightly positive. So I decided, well, you know what? Instead of 3 variables, I'm just going to instead of 4 variables, I'm just going to use 3. So here's the last logistic regression. I'm using 3 variables: months, duration, physical marriage, knowledge of each other, and the appellant family's sentiment score. Great. So I got some coefficients. Now I ask myself, well, what am I going to do with this? Now again, if you stop watching this like 20 minutes ago, I totally get it, because now we're drifting into stats, trying to calculate probabilities, whereas this is the most unjurisprudent study that you could possibly think of. So I came up with this example. 55-year-old Canadian. He went to the Philippines. He met somebody online, went to the Philippines to meet her. Okay, he has 3 adult children. One son is fully on board, but he's got 2 other kids who don't like the fact that his new wife is so young. So I fed this into the same logic, and here's the scoring. The sentiment analysis: the appellant's family is -2, applicant's family attitude is +1, and I threw in another wrinkle. He didn't tell his new wife that he won the lottery, and this is actually based on an actual ID dismissal. The wife decided not to tell her new husband that she won the lottery, and the case was dismissed. And because of that fact, that the lack of sharing of information, that case's knowledge of each other's score was also really low. So for example, if you encounter somebody like this, you may say, you're never going to say, well, your knowledge of each other's score is very low. You may say, well, wait a minute, you may be rushing into something that you're not ready for. If you go over to the Philippines and propose yourself for 2 months, that may indicate that you're rushing it. So instead, what you could do is this. You could go on a second trip. You could bring your kids with you on the second trip to meet your new wife, and hopefully your daughter will be, the 2 other children that aren't supportive of this, they'll have a better feeling, and maybe on the second trip you'll be comfortable in disclosing the fact that you had won the lottery. So if you feed that in to that regression, to the sentiment analysis. My apologies. The slide keeps flipping on me. This is a new sentiment analysis score, and if I feed this in to the regression, it comes back, and so this is the calculation. ChatGPT actually showed this. It showed the calculation, and it says the probability of success is 99.6% of a successful appeal. So I think I'm going to end it there. I'm going to end this example there. So, for me, this is not about me telling any potential client, here's your probability. It's me teaching myself, okay, what are the important factors, and giving myself a logical foundation of, if there's a different course of action, what improvements could there be to the chances of my client winning? And yeah, I'm gonna end it there. I made a graph too, but I think that this is a good spot to end everything. So to conclude, you know, as an immigration practitioner, we want to live in a world of certainty. So when you say, for example, you have a 98% chance of winning, well, why not 100? Why not make it bulletproof? And the thing is, and this is my best way of explaining it, and I'm leveraging on this result from ChatGPT. So this is my question to ChatGPT, and here's the report from it. Probabilities are like likelihoods, not certainties. It doesn't always guarantee something will happen in a specific case. It's about trends in the data based on past data. So, oh geez, I'm so sorry. It's this mouse is really getting me. So this regression is built based on past outcomes, based on the fact patterns of similar cases, and breaking off into different variables based on what is known about this particular scenario. That's a probability. So, and again, the one score, knowledge of either sentiment score, is really strongly tied to the outcome. And when I think about it, that actually makes sense because, like I said, I've watched so many hearings now. And if when it comes to a spousal appeal, most of the examination in chief and the cross and the redirect, most of that time is about questions from one spouse to the other, about to one spouse about their knowledge of the other person, and then usually they'll bring on both people. So that's a big chunk of the time, and that's when you look at one of these case summaries, most of the explanation of the verdict is based on that. Positive factors will be letters of support from both sides of the family, and even including if they would come on as a witness. Those are really positive factors. So those are the strong that drives a high sentiment score. And so it actually makes sense. Again, the probabilities that's just calculated based on its coefficients, I'm a little dubious about it, but in the example that I just showed you, if the father decides to make sure that his own children are on board with the marriage, he spends more time making sure that the decision to get married isn't rushed, and he discloses everything, and he spends time really getting to know his new wife. That goes a long ways to a successful appeal. So in conclusion, case law is not always numerical. I use sentiment analysis, sentiment and the sentiment values, to come up with numerical values based on the text. Use it with a grain of salt. In this case, the sentiment analysis was the field for knowledge of each other, is so strong that even if you just base on that alone, the focus of that, statistically speaking, drives the case. It doesn't mean that you as an immigration practitioner should forget about everything else. You need to understand, obviously, case law, Chavez, and all those factors, and not rely on this stat, not rely on what you just heard from me. What you just heard from me is, in my mind, just the weighing of the importance of the various factors. You may think a child, if the couple had a child, it makes your case bulletproof. Obviously, it doesn't. You may think that, oh, well, there's a 20-year age difference. I think I'm going to lose. Well, maybe not. So that's the whole purpose of this study. And then for me personally, there's some variables I like to break down a little more, but I don't know if it'll be possible given the fact that I only have the case summary files from Canly. So that's it. Thank you so much for your time. It's about an hour and a half. This is this is actually my second time recording this. I had some technical difficulties, so feel free to reach out to me. If you like I said, if you stop at the descriptive stats and not focus on the logistic regression, even if you stop and pay attention to that, that alone I think will help you in your practice. This last section with the logistic regression is just in me getting a deeper understanding of the importance of each factor. So anyways, thank you so much. I don't know what I'll be doing next. If you, like I said, I love doing legal research, so if you want to collaborate, that would be great. Thank you so much. Bye bye.